Tim Anderson to the IL. Missed the last couple of days, not in the lineup today. AJ Puck back, but Tim Anderson onto the IL. This opens up opportunities for other guys. And welcome to the first ever Peter Pratt hosted Mailbag Monday. This is Locked on Marlins.
You are Locked on Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked on Marlins. This is your daily Marlins pod. I'm your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up at Miami Marlins _UK. If you're listening to the pod, of course, hit subscribe and leave a review. This is your team every day. And thanks for making Locked on Marlins your first listen of the day, maybe the second listen. Double episode Monday. Double episode. So much to get into from the weekend's action and looking ahead as well. There is a YouTube channel, so make sure you hit subscribe over on the YouTube channel. Join me there. Join me in the comments as well. This episode is sponsored by our good friends over at PrizePicks. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. All right, guys. So delighted to welcome you to the first Mailbag Monday. I threw a question out there, or I posted out there on Twitter to say, Mailbag Monday, any question you ask, I will ask it to myself and I will answer it for you. So I appreciate everyone for getting involved. I think there's maybe 6 or 7 questions in there, which is plenty for a 30-minute episode with 2 ads, no doubt. But we also have to cover some breaking news as well before we get into Mailbag Monday. That breaking news is Tim Anderson lands on the IL. Not a surprise, I would say. Tim Anderson been out of the lineup the last couple of days. Reported lower back stiffness. And now the corresponding move here becomes official. I think it was pretty clear yesterday with the Tristan Gray news where you knew AJ Puck was on his way back. Tristan Gray came up. It left it, the roster was a little bit imbalanced with 14 hitters, 12 pitchers. But I think this was clearly the plan. Get Gray up. We knew Puck's going to be back, and we know Tim Anderson's going to go the IL and probably retro it back a day or two. So all worked out in the end. Tim Anderson, though, to the IL. In many ways, let's just kind of briefly touch on Tim Anderson, where things are at here. Clearly for the Marlins this year right now is there's 2 main priorities, just to call it out. Priority 1 is to trade guys that have limited amounts of control for prospects. That's probably priority 1. Arraez already moved. Tim Anderson, expiring contract. So him, for example, Tanner Scott, Josh Bell, these are guys that expiring contracts. What can the Marlins get back, if anything, from these guys? The other thing the Marlins have demonstrated, they are not against eating the money to get a better prospect back. They are taking the Mets approach, where they're happy to eat the dough and effectively buy some prospects. That's what the Marlins are happy to do, which is encouraging. We have said about Bruce Sherman, spend some money. Bruce Sherman is investing more in rebuilding the farm than the product on the field at this moment in time. Anyway, why am I mentioning this? Priority 1, trade the assets. Well, Tim Anderson is one of those assets. The other priority is to see what you've got in some of the younger guys and treat this as a developmental year. At this point then, for Tim Anderson, he's an expiring contract. He's only on a 1-year, $5 million deal. And the reality is the Marlins at this point would love Tim Anderson to be healthy enough and perform to a degree where they can move him later down the line for a prospect or 2 back they can add to the farm system. And they happily eat the money, no doubt about it. I'm sure they'll be happy to do that. The problem they're facing here with Tim Anderson is the production is it's nowhere near enough. And you have to look and think Tim Anderson's only value really at this point would be if a team is in a serious bind and they think that he can add something towards the deadline. But at this point with Tim Anderson, the production, you have to wonder if the most likely outcome here would be a DFA scenario. The reality is the Marlins have quite a bit of a logjam in some ways within the middle infield in particular. And if the season's cooked, Tim Anderson has no trade value, and you want to give other guys a go, then maybe that decision will come. We'll wait to see. I don't know how long this stint's going to be. Is it going to be for the minimum time? Is it going to be for longer? We'll wait to see on that. But I just wanted to call out that from a Tim Anderson perspective, considering the production and the performance thus far, landing on the IL, not a bad situation. Bit more playing time for Brujan, bit more time for Otto Lopez. We're seeing they're the two main beneficiaries of this one. Both of them starting right up the middle again. Tristan Gray's up. We'll see if he gets some playing time. Hopefully he does. Could be fun. Like I mentioned on the earlier episode, the profile's fun. There's going to be tons of swings. Most of them will miss. One or two of them will connect, and it's going to be fun. And I think this is, as Marlins fans now, we're just happy to see maybe some of the younger guys start to get given some opportunities. So before we really fully get into the meat and potatoes here of the Mailbag Monday, Tim Anderson to the IL and AJ Puck back from off the IL and straight back into the bullpen. So I think that's also a positive situation. With that being said, let's hit the first ad early, a touch early, and then let's get fully into Mailbag Monday. So, guys, this episode is brought to you by our good friends over at PrizePicks. And we've got the graphics to go with that. PrizePicks, as you know, are America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less than on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. Baseball season is well underway. Do not miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your PrizePicks entries, whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs. Take your pick of more or less than and add them to your PrizePicks entries today. And PrizePicks has something for every sports fan out there. From baseball and basketball to League of Legends and everything in between, you can pick LeBron, Shohei Ohtani, Connor McDavid, and Jude Bellingham, all in the same entry. So all you have to do is download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Reminder, download the app today. The app is PrizePicks. The code, use it. It's lowercase and it is LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, guys, welcome back to Locked On Marlins with me, Peter Pratt. It is Mailbag Monday, and we are digging straight into it. I put it out there, Mailbag Monday, first ever one. You ask a question, I will answer it on this show. We're going to do these a little bit more regular because it's great to have other perspectives on other questions about the Marlins, particularly when at times there's not going to be a lot of joy for us to cover. With that being said, let's plow right into it. And the first question submitted was by the UK GOAT, Sean Barrett. It's Monday, of course. Where are you, Sean? He's in work, I think, by the way. I need to get him back on rapido. Sean Barrett, though, posed the question. A good one, by the way. So, when will the next winning season? When will be the next winning season? Asked Sean Barrett. Well, I'm going to call it now that I don't believe it will be in 2024. So I'm going to call that out. In my opinion, this rebuild timeline, I believe the Marlins will not be good in 24. I don't believe they'll be good in 25 either. Gut feel is in 26, I still feel they'll be some ways away. The best case, in my opinion, will be for the Marlins to have an over 500 campaign in 2027. The reason I say that is what we've already seen is the Marlins adding talent, young talent. They're adding talent, teenagers, and which is fine. To be fair, a couple of the Urias package in return was, a couple of guys that are 22, 23. So they're not a million miles away, let's say. We'll talk about them in a bit more detail later on. But the profile to me seems to be like Peter Bendix is layering in a lot of super young talent. So for me, I think that kind of pushes the ETA backwards. I think for them to be better any earlier than that would mean for them needing to spend some dough along the way, which I can't see happening. So in my heart of hearts, I think the best case situation is the Marlins playing 500 ball in 2027 or even later than that. Let me know what you think. I don't know what Sean thinks either, but I appreciate the question. I think it's a really good one. And I think it starts to talk to the timeline of this rebuild, this sustainable success methodology. When does the success start? And how long do you sustain it for? Other questions. We don't quite know. Kyle Seelaff, when we spoke about this topic, said Peter Bendix will never put a timeline on it because as soon as you have a timeline, it's measurable. You don't want to oversell and underdeliver. Maybe you want to happily undersell and overdeliver. Maybe the timeline will be 2030, and the next thing is we have a stunning year in 27. But I think Kyle made a great point in that topic area. I don't think you'll ever hear Bendix put a timeline on it because, frankly, that's a measuring stick. And if he misses it, it just creates more pressure for him, which should be looking to avoid at this point. But considering how long rebuilds typically take, this is usually a 3 to 5 year window where, it's probably in that range. So, don't know how you feel about that. We'll see. Next question. This one was from Jeremiah. Jeremiah asking this one. And make sure you're checking out Jeremiah's podcast as well. Another one of the Marlins podcast studs out there. Jeremiah asking, who was one of your favorite Marlins players that casual fans don't know about? In brackets, can't be on the team now. So a favorite Marlins player that casual fans don't know about. Does he? I don't know if Jeremiah is saying the casual fans, i.e., non-Marlins fans or Marlins fans that are casuals, etc. I don't know. I think or is it that people know that I'm a huge fan of Brinson, clearly, and they know that I had an Isan Diaz jersey? Is it other players? Anyway, to be honest with you, there's, I've grown up with Marlins baseball from 2016 onwards, and there were some fun players along the way. Many of them traded, clearly. I would say in terms of my favorite players that are less well-known, there's a few of them, to be honest. The first one that comes to mind is JT Riddle. I don't know why, but I was fully sold on JT Riddle being a stud. He ended up not being a stud, clearly. But I believed at that point that he would be, which I thought, it was what it was. So JT Riddle was definitely one of my favorite players in the early kind of rebuild phase where he just got a ton of playing time. I always have a soft spot for Monte Harrison, but I think a lot of people know Monte, but less so for what he did on the field. But for me, I just loved, before we saw Monte at the big leagues and that level, I was just enticed by the profile. I think we all were. I think we all thought Monte Harrison could be a potential stud. And then getting to know Monte Harrison a little bit better in the 2020 campaign, where I was involved in the Marlins media Zoom room circuit, and Monte Harrison was a part of that roster. Monte Harrison was like a standout guy, clearly, from that roster. The personality just oozed out of him, I guess. The reality was in Monte Harrison, unfortunately, the stick didn't quite deliver. He's now making a go of it playing American football instead, which is interesting, but I absolutely loved his fire, his passion, and I fell in love with the potential. And I think we do that a lot. I think not just Marlins fans, I think just baseball fans in general. I think we probably spend a touch too long thinking about prospects, dreaming about upsides and all of this kind of stuff. We probably, it's weighted a little bit too heavily. But it's interesting, I guess, and people want to, see something and think there could be a player here and whatever it might be. I don't know, but I've never really been a huge prospect guy, but Monte Harrison definitely caught my attention. There's a few others too, like along the way as well, that I'm sure I'm missing. I was a big fan of Justin Bohr, to be honest with you. I love that kind of old school first base situation of Justin Bohr. Like, just a big dude that could hit bombs and look like a bit of fun. Like, I definitely enjoyed a lot of Justin Bohr. Again, like, the casuals, I guess, will still know Justin Bohr. So as Jeremiah wanted me to go a layer even deeper than that. Maybe. To be honest with you, when I think of Marlins pitchers right in my early days, I always think of Edinson Volquez, obviously, for the no-hitter. And I remember watching that game on a slight delay. It wasn't quite live, but I was almost live because Theo was just born. And that's how I really heavily, for those that don't know this story, I'd been to Miami in 2016. My son was born in 2017 in the April. And of course, in those early months, kids are awake at all hours, right? So with me and my wife, I said, listen, I'm happy to go to bed early at like 7, 8 o'clock, and I'll get up through the night in the night feed of doom. And during that period where Theo's awake and needs a bottle and whatever he needs doing, I can sit there and watch Marlins baseball live. I thought, this is perfect. So that no-hitter against the Diamondbacks, it wasn't quite live. I didn't watch it from the start exactly at the time, but I was on a delay, but still, it was like it was live. And I mean, I was living and breathing every pitch in that, obviously for a no-no. So yeah, there you go. I mean, is Edinson Volk, does he qualify? Brad Ziegler, does he qualify? I don't even know. I don't know, man. Oh man, I'm having flashbacks to the rebuild and just thinking, man, there was a period where the Marlins had a lot of hopes and dreams and a lack of talent. Showtime asked the question, when do the prospects get called up? I think this is a really good question. And when we're talking about the prospects, like, who are we talking about? I guess is the follow-up to that. Are we talking about Griffin Conine? Are we talking about Victor Mesa Jr.? Are we talking about Troy Johnson? Is it that cluster of guys? Which I feel like that's probably who we're talking about. Are we talking about Max Meyer, maybe? If it's those guys, then the reality is the nearer the deadline you get and maybe the Marlins moves start to happen, then that's the most likely situation. Clearly, as we've seen with Tim Anderson at this point, Tim Anderson going down creates an opportunity. That opportunity is for Tristan Gray. And so this links to health. If anything happens to Jazz, for example, and I'm praying that it doesn't because I'm savoring every Jazz at bat this year, no doubt. But let's say something happens with Jazz. What's to say Victor Mesa Jr. isn't the next guy up? Or Griffin Conine, to be honest with you, because Dane Myers could slide into center field. We'll see. So there's health into this. But I think more likely, clearly we think about when is there going to be a roster churn, and that roster churn will be driven by trades or DFA situations, if indeed there is just zero trade value. I don't think there's those types of guys on the roster. Like if I think about Josh Bell, yes, he's owed a lot of money this year, but as we saw this weekend, and the weekend, like Josh Bell, for some reason, Josh Bell has an ability to absolutely unload on Zach Wheeler, where no one else seems to be able to touch him. Josh Bell, just for whatever reason, sees Wheeler. Josh Bell, we saw it last year. Slow start, then gets moved to the Marlins, then comes alive. Second half, Josh Bell, he always comes alive. And so right now, you may be thinking there's a lack of value maybe with Bell. But I feel like if the Marlins eat the money, then for a proven guy, there'll be some way of churning some sort of prospect return from that trade, in my opinion. And so Showtime, to answer the question directly, when do they get called up? If everyone remains healthy, then it will be very much, I think, in my opinion, nearer the deadline. I don't think the Marlins will be looking to DFA Bell or Tim Anderson if they can avoid it. Tanner Scott, clearly not. And so I think they're going to ride it out as far as they can and see if they can flip those guys for anything. I think they'll probably retain a ton of dough on Josh Bell, and maybe the same for Tim Anderson. But it wouldn't stun me if Tim Anderson is DFA'd at an earlier phase, because there's definitely a slew of talent infield-wise that maybe the Marlins have that they'd like to give a go. But let's see how long this IL stint is. Let's hit the final ad, and then we have a couple more questions in the queue here on the first ever Mailbag Monday, from me anyway, on Locked On Marlins. Before we do that, this episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Policygenius. And the graphics are ready. And Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policygenius helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help talk you through everything. You can easily compare all of those quotes from all of the top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. Policygenius also gives you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. They have no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. Also, you can trust the guidance of all their users and customers. They have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. So check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonmlb or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonmlb. All right, guys, back here on a Mailbag Monday on Locked On Marlins. We have a couple of further questions on deck here. This next one is from Cade Needhammer. Needhammer? Cade. Either way, Cade, appreciate the question. The question is, could we see Nathan Martorella at some point in the near future, end of June, early to mid-July, as starting first base or platoon first base, since Bell will be eventually traded? Great question, Cade. And I think this is an interesting one, particularly for Martorella, the player you call out. For those, just to remind you, Martorella is one of the guys that was returned back as part of the Urias trade. He's actually started, his career, I guess, pretty well. He reported to Pensacola, so he's in Double-A. And although obviously this is a pretty small sample size, he's only played 6 games thus far, 25 at-bats, 8 hits, just a single double, 1 RBI, 1 walk. He's hitting .320, an OPS of .730. So nice start for Martorella. He looks to be, considering, he's hit .322 in 2022. He's hit .298 this season. There's definitely a contact profile hitter there in Martorella, which looks interesting. When I saw some coverage of him as well in one of his first games for Pensacola, it might have been where he hit that double actually down the line. And man, oh man, there was some similarities to Luis Arias. I'm not going to lie. Like just the stance, the swing, everything. It kind of looked like Luis Arias. And so that was encouraging on that sense. And just to kind of, I guess, call out that trade. I haven't really spoken about the trade and the return a ton since it's happened. Obviously, we just mentioned Martorella, who started pretty well. Also, Jacob Marcy he's had a very interesting start to his career, also at Double-A Pensacola, where thus far, appeared in 6 games as well. He's had 9 walks to 5 Ks. So he's got an OBP of 481 at the moment. Unbelievable. Like, I think he had a 4-walk game at some point. He's also had a home run, 3 hits, a home run, 9 walks, just 5 Ks, 2 stolen bags. Really interesting profile there from Jacob Marcy, no doubt. The other interesting part as well, just to go back to the Urias trade, is Dylan Head. It was a very interesting situation a few days ago where the Marlins, media, because what happens is you get to the, the start of the media session and head of PR will talk through, okay, here's the injury updates. And that's how that then translates to all of the information that's shared generally. this player is recovering, this player is on a rehab, this player is doing that, etc., etc. Normally, it is guys that are covered in that list of players that are on the big league roster, etc. It was a very interesting situation that Dylan Head appeared in that update as well. Normally, minor leaguers, clearly, particularly guys that are 19, do not appear on that type of update. But the Marlins felt because, well, he's one of the headliners in the Arias deal and has basically not played a game for the Marlins since, that they had to update everyone on Dylan Head. So I thought, again, that was a very interesting wrinkle. We kind of saw the same with Sixto Sanchez, where he was thrown from 21 feet, etc., where Sixto, he was so far out of mind and out of sight, but the Marlins felt the need to keep updating everyone on his progress or lack thereof, which I thought was interesting. And the reason they felt they had to do that is because, well, he's forever connected to one of the biggest trades they've ever made in moving JT Realmuto, one of the best catchers maybe there's ever been in baseball in some ways. And they get back Sixto. He performed well in a small sample. And then we never see him again for 3 years, which he ends up with these updates. Anyway, I've gone off on a long tangent there. Cade asked the question, are we going to see Martorella potentially end of June, early, mid-July, whatever it might be? My gut feel is no, specifically on Martorella. The reason being with him, he right now isn't on the 40-man. To get him onto the big league roster, he will then need to be added to the 40-man. And considering the Marlins at this point, and going back to the first question that Sean asked of what's the timeline isn't overly imminent. And from a Marlins perspective, clearly, adding into his the 40-man then starts to burn the option years, etc. So I don't think they have a need to add Martorella to the 40-man for at least one more full season. It may even be two. I can't remember top of my head where he's up to, but he's got at least one more year. So they don't need to add him this year to protect him. I don't think it's until maybe even the next year or the year after. So the gut feel is the Marlins won't start the clock with him. He's now a prospect they've recently acquired. He started well. He looks like an interesting contact profile. However, they have another guy that is exactly like that, but is like nearly 30 in Troy Johnston. Surely the Marlins will have to give Troy some sort of go. But what, he's continued to hit. And so, yes, if it's Troy Johnston that you're asking about, then absolutely yes. I think we see Troy Johnston and a plethora of guys all kind of mixing and matching at first base once the deadline comes and goes. The question comes down to is when do they move Bell? Bell will be moved. Whether that's DFA'd or whether that is via trade, he will be moved. It's just a matter of when. And we've seen it already. There's tons of guys. We've got Manny Rivera playing at first base. Berger's been there. Troy Johnson could come up. There could be anyone could play first base. We may even see Avisel Garcia at first base. Who knows on that one? We have a question here from I'm Out E. I don't know. Don't know if that's the right way of phrasing the handle. But anyway, the question asked her, what are your top 3 pitchers and top 3 hitters on the team now you would keep moving forwards with this rebuild? I feel like that's a really topical question, obviously. Who would I have kept? Well, firstly, what I would have said is I would have kept Arias. He can't do that now because, well, he's one of the major assets, and so he's going to bring the most back. So I think that's kind of like the trade here, right? This is the balance of, well, if you keep all of the guys that have all of the trade assets, then this rebuild is really going to take forever. And so tough choices need to be made, disciplined decisions and disciplined moves, however Bendix wants to phrase it. But I would have kept the Arias, by the way. We can't do that now because he's no longer on the roster, so we can't go down that. For me, I'm building around Jazz. I think people know that for certain. I think you have to keep Sandy because he's shown what he's shown. He's cost control for multiple years. He's an absolute stud. However, is Sandy going to absolutely reignite a rebuild? Maybe. You build around Yuri Perez. Absolutely. And I think you probably then layer in there from this roster anyway, one of the other pitchers. Do you layer in Max Meyer? Do you build, could you build around Sandy, Yuri, and Max Meyer? And then, a 4-5 around that. What that means is, do you move on from Brax? Do you move on from Luzardo? to really kickstart this rebuild? I don't know. I don't know, to be honest. The wild card for me in that one is Max Meyer. Like, is Max Meyer really, really for real? Is he for real? Are we certain that he's for real? I mean, he had an amazing outing against the Braves. I feel like the Marlins are managing him in a way where they think he's for real, and they're trying to gain extra years of control and whatever they want to do. So I feel like that's where the Marlins head. The Marlins are telling me they think he's real. Skip Schumacher's telling me they think it's real. I feel like Craig Mish is telling me that he thinks he's real as well. So with that being said, I think I'm going to buy the hype on that one. I'm going to go current roster, 3 pitchers, Max Meyer, Yuri Perez, and Sandy Alcantara as my 3. In terms of offensive guys, I'm building around Jazz. No doubt about it. Offense is more tricky. Offense is definitely more tricky, where, frankly, outside of Jazz, I'm probably happy to move on from any of them. Jesus Sanchez has a very intriguing profile and clearly is very topical at the moment because of this bat speed situation. And you just think, what could Jesus Sanchez be? But honestly, I look around, Bell clearly are not building around. Like, you can't be building around, Otto Lopez and Vidal Brujan at this point. Like, maybe they'll be okay. Role players, I don't know. A lot of people like Jake Berger, clearly. So Berger probably should be up there. Then you think about De La Cruz. Do you build around him? I don't know. I just feel like De La Cruz. I just feel like we could do better. I think if you're building around someone, they have to be elite. Is De La Cruz elite? Will he ever be elite? I don't know. I guess right now, if you put a gun to my head and said you have to pick 3 hitters to build around that are currently on this roster, who would they be? Who would you keep? Jazz is one, Berger's the other, and probably Jesus Sanchez. It's definitely not Avisel Garcia, I can tell you that. Let's have a quick look here. Was there any further questions? I think there was 1 or 2 joke ones in there. When are they coming out with the Peter Pratt special bobblehead with wine glass? Thank you for that, Dolphin. Larry, always a big listener of the show. Appreciate you, Larry, for that one. Hopefully soon. Just imagine that if there was a Peter Pratt bobblehead that they came out with. I mean, how many would they produce? Like 100? I don't know. I mean, that could be pretty crazy. But I think that's covered all the questions for this Mailbag Monday. We sprinkled in a bit of Tim Anderson to the IL news. When's the next winning season going to be? I think it's going to be 2027 at the earliest. Favorite Marlins players that casual fans don't know about. I was always, for some reason, a fan of JT Riddle. I was always a fan of Justin Bohr, no doubt. And I've always been a huge fan of Monte Harrison. Didn't get his jersey, though, by the way. When do the prospects called up? When the trades happen, fundamentally. Or when the injuries kick in, and we're already seeing that right now. What about Martorella in terms of getting a promotion and getting some action at first base? I don't think so. Because he's not on the 40-man. I feel like the Marlins are going to do everything to retain as much control of these guys as they possibly can. Troy Johnson, different situation. Top 3 pitchers and top 3 hitters on the team now to build around moving forward. Sandy, Yuri, Max. And then from a hitting perspective, I'm forced to Jazz, Berger, Jesus Sanchez. It's going to wrap us up, guys. Thanks for everyone for submitting questions. We're going to do this a little bit more regularly. I think it's fun. Different types of questions, different types of conversations. So appreciate everyone for sending in questions. Appreciate everyone for making Locked On Marlins your first listen or your second listen. If you've doubled up on episodes today on Monday, the 13th of May. The Marlins are playing very shortly. Sixto Sanchez will be taking the mound. We'll look forward to that one. We'll likely recap on that one tomorrow. I look forward to seeing you then.